Hello everyone and welcome to yet another episode of CampusCare EdTalks. I, Sakshi Jain, your host for the show, would like to welcome you all. EdTalk is a platform where educators and leaders come on board and express their viewpoints related to education and society. Our topic for the discussion is how to reach students who have experienced trauma. And to express their viewpoints on the same, we have with us Mrs. Anjali Razdan, Director Academics, Maluha International School. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your precious time with us, ma'am. And to start off with the session, the very first thing that I would like to put it across to you is how do you teach students with trauma?
I think the first and the foremost thing is we have to provide a safe environment to them because considering the fact that they are just out from a trauma, and trauma is a very big thing. So if we understand not only we but we mean the stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, and everybody around them, that provide them a safe environment first, so that their trauma is kind of turns into a little bit of trust. Again, once that is established, we can take it forward with other measures as it comes forward. I hope that answers.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, ma'am, how do you help, so, ma'am, how do you help a child who has been traumatized?
Okay, now that's the biggest thing because a child who has been traumatized, or even an adult for that matter, first of all, they will not like to speak of the trauma. So it's a very important thing that they're promoted to speak. So they are given that freedom that please speak. We are there to listen to you. So that again the feeling of trust is built around that child, saying we are there to help. We are not there to kind of pull you down again. But it is very easy said and done to say that you can speak out and we are going to listen. And problems cannot be solved by just a flip of a finger. So the first important thing is express yourself. So let them get the that kind of a feeling that yes, I think it's okay if I express. This expression of mine is going to be told to the others, where it's going to counter back on the child or an adult. So that feeling. The other is that there has to be a little bit of people around them, where an interpersonal relationship also has to be dealt with. That so is one person talking to the child or the person or the adult, the other people also around it should also be showing that support, and that we are on the same platform of listening and you talking. So I think these are the two very important things in terms of helping the first step towards it. I mean, subsequently, when we're going to talk, we'll add something more. But the first is listen to them and make them talk. And you cannot do that by force. So there has to be so many elements in that in order to understand what is the trauma, where it has started, what could be it? Could it be physical abuse? Could it be a mental abuse? It could be a combination of both. So all this needs first and foremost listening. And let me tell you, previous trauma will never talk in the beginning. So you have to melt the ice, and that is a very important task.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, ma'am, how do you understand whether a child or a student is, been to some trauma or something, or what sort of trauma? Do you think there are, different scenarios of different trauma situations because each to its own, ma'am. So, I could be, traumatized because of X Y Z situation, and some other student may be, traumatized with some other situation. So, how do you understand a first that a child is being traumatized or suffering from something anxiety and depression or something has been triggering his mind and soul? First, how do you understand that? And once you've understood it, how is it how do you deal with those kids, because different situations and different backgrounds and surroundings are there.
Yeah. See, trauma has indicators. There's a body language for people which speaks more than words, and you must be a sensitive person in order to deal with that body language to understand that this is a trauma, this is an abuse. This can be various forms of repercussions. But and none of them will speak. They're going to shout on the rooftops and say, "Hey, I've been traumatized." No, such people, such children, they do not say that. So there are indicators of that the child has an abuse or it has a trauma, or trauma is a result of an abuse basically. Trauma is an after effect of an abuse. So where one has to reach to the part where what is the abuse actually? What happened? So that is again, as I said, a very difficult proposition to get it there. You cannot do it by force at all. So there are indicators in the person. One of the indicators is the person is shows abnormal behavior. Whatever was the normal routine that person is doing, you'll find that in such situations they're completely withdrawn. They'll be we don't know. Depressed is a very scientific clinical term. I'm not using that term here. I'm talking about very general layman's language. They will not be using the normal routine as they would be normally doing. So that's one indicator that why is the deviation observable in this person. So there is some reason. The other many times, sometimes the kids particularly, they stop eating, they lose their appetite, they stop sleeping. You will find the sleep patterns changes because of trauma also. So these are some indicators one has to see. The other part is that either they become aggressive, overtly aggressive, or they become so introverted that they're kind of in the shell, and this is a very, very high observable behavior because they were not and then they are. So that change is visible to people who can see it with that sensitivity. One has to have a little sensitivity to understand, okay, it's not like this, but what's happened? So these are small indicators of the fact that a person, it may be a child, it may be an adult, it varies a little bit between the two, that they have been traumatized. I repeat again, trauma is the after effects of an abuse. They can be physical abuse, mental abuse, various kinds of abuses. It's an after effect. So after effect is what the body, the body in a human being. There's something called psychosomatic effect. Psychology having an effect on the soma. Soma means the body. So the psychology plays an effect on the body, and then the body starts behaving in that manner without a disease, without an illness. It starts having problems. So one small instance I can give is the kids where suddenly they start having stomach ache, stomach pain, or sometimes leg pain, or sometimes headaches. And when the doctor examines them thoroughly, they'll find there is absolutely no reason for the stomach ache or this headache or whatever ache. This is the psychosomatic effect. That means there is a pain, there is a problem. It's a genuine problem. The person experiences that, but it's not arising out of any clinical problem, right? This is a trauma. This is the after effects of something that has happened, which results in this kind of behavior. So if I have to sum it up, there is a certain indicator which will be visible in people who have been traumatized. And these indicators are more bodily indicators, more behavioral indicators, rather than indicators of speech. They will not speak that there is a thing. One has to pick it up from these and then infer what could it be, And of course, as we go forward, there are a lot of steps to understand. So if this is the situation, then what could be the reason for that, and so on and so forth, and then work on the treatment of that. It's a long process. Trauma is not something which is cough and cold, where we take a tablet and it's going to get over. But trauma is something which is more in the mind. It's a mind based thing, and whatever is in the mind that doesn't have shortcuts to getting ready. It takes a little time, but then it has to be dealt with it.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, ma'am, how teachers can help abused students?
Oh, a lot of ways. First and foremost, the child spends a good amount of time in the school. Sort of your 12 hours of the day. Of course, there's not that all the 12 hours that you use, but something like 6.5 hours to 7 hours are spent in the school. And the balance are with eating and drinking and in your home chores that you do. So a good amount of time is spent in the school. So therefore, I think your question should have been, how will the parent solve it? The parent cannot solve it. The parents is a very limited time. So teachers are a bigger area which we can help. So how do your teacher help? Number one is we cannot pick any and each teacher and say, okay, you're the traumatized person. So don't label. You cannot label a person says is traumatized. There are certain indicators. and very subtly it has to be dealt with. Then choosing a person, a teacher, to kind of deal with this also has to be very carefully thought of. You cannot pick a non-sensitive person and say, "Yeah, you're going to deal with this." As I said, it's not cold and cough. It's a psychosomatic problem. So this teacher has to be formally sensitive first. Sensitive means empathetic. Understand the pain on the other side over there. And also, there is something like the first thing that the teacher has to do is encourage this person, saying, "You got strengths, forget your weaknesses. You also have some strengths in you." And every person has strengths, right? So that strength, if they can be focusing first on the child, saying, "You can do this, you are a very good organizer, you are a very good singer, you have got, this thing." So when they take off from the strengths, what should I say? The strength increases. The child start, they may not react at that time, but they start thinking, "Yes, of course, I have this quality in me, I have that." So focus first on the strength. Then I would suggest, there are negative behavior is observable. So we can always turn the negative into a positive behavior, or a positive way of thinking. I'm having a bottle in front of me. Now, if I have to say this in a negative manner, I'll say it's half full. But if I have to say the same thing in a positive manner, I'll say it's, I'm so sorry, it's half full, now it's half empty. Depends on which way you want to interpret it. One is positive, the other is negative. So, negative behavior will enhance more negativity, but positive behavior will increase the strengths of the person. So, that's one of the things which a teacher can do: enhance the positivity, enhance their strengths. And then, of course, that there's something called social behavior. For people, for children who are in a trauma, their social behavior also has a distinct difference, change from what it was before the trauma was there. So that social behavior in a different way has to be also pro society, not anti society. The trauma can be of various ways. Somebody's beaten up so badly, and then they get up and they want to beat somebody else very badly because of that anger, right? So that is not a pro-social behavior. That's an anti-social behavior. When what we have terrorists in our society. We have so many kinds of negative people in our society. They're normal people. They are not abnormal people. They're normal people. But have they been given the notion that you can do the same thing more constructively rather than doing destructively because you are angry, things would have been much, much different. So, such people, if you are saying what should the teacher do, the teacher should focus on their strengths. The teacher should focus on their positivity. The teacher should focus on converting the negativity to positivity. And of course, with the thing that, okay, with this positivity, don't be antisocial, be social, be pro-social, because life is not just this much. Life is much beyond that. And of course, the support, very important. At the backdrop of all this will be the support that I'm there, we're there, we're going to help you out. I hope that answers.
Absolutely, ma'am. So, ma'am, what are the trauma-informed teaching strategies? So, okay, we understand that you have to first identify, first understand. You have to be sensitive enough to catch the small details of a student behaving in a certain manner. So, once we've done that, and how do we teach? So, we know that we understand that a student or a kid has been traumatized, or a group of people have been traumatized. So, what could be the teaching strategies for them?
Okay. Again, I would not say teaching strategies, and I would say coping strategies. How will a child cope? Because the child comes to school not only for teaching and learning, but also comes to understand social skills. That's why otherwise online learning would have been everything for us. But school is a place for building social skills in a child, how to interact with good people, how to interact with bad people, and what's the difference between good and bad is
Correct.
social skills, right? So if a school has to kind of understand, okay, we have trauma. First of all, there is a prerequisite now in the CBSE. I'm not really sure about the other boards, but there's something called child abuse cell. There's something called an act, which is called POCSO Act, POCSO, prevention of sexually abuse, some the crimes in children. It may not be necessarily sexual abuse crimes, but it may be trauma of various kinds emerging from it. So there is always a committee to be set in a school which will be looking into the problems of children, day to day, unsaid problems and said problems, visible problems and invisible problems. So a committee is there always, and there are counselors in the schools. That's a mandatory thing now that the school should have, a good school should have, to which the child or whoever is having an abuse or observable thing should be sent. So what does the counselor do? The counselor will give them all those kind of inputs to kind of come out of this with the assurance factor. And so then there will be something added to that, that the counselor tells them the teacher X and the teacher Y and the teacher Z, saying that, okay, you have to not give these kind of questions, you give those kind of questions to this child. Or this child understand bad touching, so you just show them the thing material. I don't want you to make them right because maybe the child is traumatized. So that this counselor will start giving certain inputs to the teachers, who in turn will use those inputs in their teaching learning method, dealing with traumatic child. More importantly is the peer groups, the other friends. If they are going to kind of laugh at them, or they're going to do any kind of mockery, this will worsen the situation. So these friends around has to also be, to an extent, kind of made to be empathetic towards such children. That's again a counselor's job. But I would say today every teacher has to be a counselor. Every teacher in a school has to be a counselor in order to be sympathetic and empathetic to the kids. Then you have to make sure that in future, how do you prevent it? Suppose there's something emerging from the child's home, you never know from where it's come, or if it's in the school. How do we prevent it rather than how do we correct it? So there are two measures. One is preventive action, one is corrective action. Corrective action is a very temporary action. Okay, it did come, we're going to punish that thing and matter ends. But that thing might again occur. So we have to go more for preventive cure, preventive action rather than corrective measures, right? So that is a basic underlying statement in this, what a school needs to do. Rest of it is teaching the subject, teaching that everybody knows. But then how do you make a traumatized child or a person go through the teaching process slowly and steadily, is with these measures out there. Maybe a big help from the counselor as well, a psychological counselor. Yeah.
Absolutely, ma'am. So it's basically, the major chunk of this entire conversation, how you channelize the behavior of a student who has already been abused and now is traumatized as a result of it. So it's just how positively and how accurately and how, the group and the society and the peers he or she is followed by has to be in a positive way in order to channelize all his energy into something which is positive. Only then even the student will be able to cope up, and the teachers and the parents itself will be able to get that help which really needs for any student to be pulling off from that situation. So a takeaway from this session is entirely when how do you actually make your surroundings, with the help of course the external helps is always the teachers and the parents and the peers, and with the help of the a trained learner like a psychologist, we are talking about the counselor. Once we get the help of it, we know how to channelize it, and once we understand how to channelize it, it's like how we can give directions to somebody who's not that who's actually been into that situation. So thank you so very much, ma'am, for imparting your knowledge and experience on this topic, and it was indeed an insightful and informative session where we discussed some real life experiences where, like you've told, that it's important how you deal with it, how quickly on how sensitive you are to pick certain situations, because sometimes there are teachers only who pick certain things from a student and decides to tell the parents that have you been noticing, because a parent might be thinking that he or she is making just a stupid excuse to get out of homework or do not learn or is not interested in studies or something like that. That's a very basic of any parent to understand the kids making certain excuses. But there are it's like a two-way process wherein sometimes the teacher picks it or sometimes the parents understands the sensitivity of the child. Yes ma'am, of course you can
I
speak.
just want to interrupt you here. If a parent doesn't understand the child, I think that's the biggest traumatic experience everybody has. You
Absolutely
see,
ma'am.
a child can be doing certain things which they don't like, and everybody is very normal about that. That's not trauma. A
Right.
parent should be able to understand the difference between this is a one-time, two-time action, and that this is a trauma that he is
Right.
undergoing. Many times parents say you're a drama king, you're a drama queen, हमेशा drama करते रहते हैं. That may be true, but then that's a drama or king or queen doesn't last for long. It's a very short term thing that they do. And parents
Absolutely.
connect to that,
Yeah.
which is wrong. So they have to understand the underlying thing.
Yeah,
And
that is
one
that.
last thing is, before I this thing is, whether it's a school or it's a parent, both sides are responsible for the child's, is that they should get that feeling that you're not alone.
Absolutely.
Very important feeling. You are not alone. We are there with you. What the traumatic person requires. They may not say that, but it's understood.
Absolutely. It's like the support they're looking out, even if they're not asking for,
Yes.
even if they're, telling you to get away from themselves, even then they're asking you to come back and, be a
Absolutely.
cuddling hug to, whatever situation that you're good, facing and putting across. Looking
Yes.
forward to much more sessions like this on with you, ma'am. We are very glad that you came and spared your time and, imparted this knowledge. Thank you so very much again, ma'am. And with this note, I, Sakshi Jain, host of the show, would like to sign off. Have a very great day, everyone.